guys, and welcome to another episode of Piano and Keyboard Artists, the channel where we discuss everything related to keyboarded musical instruments, synthesizers, pianos and artist development with me, Vaughan George. And today we're talking about Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, or better known as OMD. Now, many of you have asked me to talk about OMD, and I'm happy to talk about OMD because they're one of my all-time favorites, one of the absolute pioneers of electro-pop and electronic music. And let's delve into it. So OMD were formed in the 70s by school friends Andy McCluskey and Paul Humphreys. They were school friends from the age of 16, and they formed OMD in the late 70s. Now, as legend has it, they had a similar taste in music, and obviously it was this similar taste in music and the love for music which formed the band. And instead of forming a traditional band, they liked the idea of the tape machine and the electronic sounds, heavily influenced by Kraftwerk, which went on to influence all their work. And of course their very first single, Electricity, which they released in 1979, was paying homage to Kraftwerk's Radioactivity. Interesting how Andy McCluskey talks how he was interested in music. He considered the drums, could not afford the drums, so he thought, okay, I'll try the guitar. Guitar hurt his fingers, so he went, okay, I'll try the bass. He went out and bought a bass guitar in a store in Merseyside, where they lived. He obviously he didn't have much money, so he bought whatever he could afford. But the bass guitar that he bought was a left-handed bass guitar, and because he's right-handed, the only way he could play it was to turn the bass guitar upside down. So he learned to play guitar. Well, he learned the bass guitar by playing it upside down, which I think is incredible. So they formed OMD in the late 70s, and their first gig was at the legendary Eric's, owned by Roger Eagles. The name OMD came about because they needed a name, and I don't think they gave the name too much thought. And I think at the time, because they were quite sort of like avant-garde and really sort of like a little bit off the wall, that they decided to go with Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. And of course people said, you know, you'll never get anywhere with a name like that. And there's many stories in rock and roll and music history how people have defied the odds when people say you'll never get anywhere, and it's usually people who go completely out of their comfort zone or a bit left field that usually become outstanding, and OMD are a classic example. So they got their first few gigs at Eric's. This was a legendary venue. I mean, Joy Division played there, Echo and the Bunnymen and several others. I think Elvis Costello was there as well. But anyway, that venue unfortunately is closed, because that's what we do these days. We shut down iconic venues and we build a block of flats, because we are becoming so rock and roll these days. So they essentially used to play there, I think, on Thursday nights. And I think when they got to about their 6th gig, which I don't think they were getting paid, I think, as Andy McCluskey said, when Roger Eagles gave them 6 bottles of beer, they felt they were on the road to making it. And it's interesting because the story of OMD, if you listen to from the time they started to the time they got signed, it happened very quickly. And I think a lot of it was, although the name was quite pretentious, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, and they were not pretentious. I think Andy McCluskey was a very serious guy, I suppose, as he said. And then you get Paul Humphreys, who's the more sort of quieter, more sort of introverted one. But the chemistry between the two men worked perfectly. Andy always talked about himself as being the sort of the editor and the arranger, and Paul being more the sort of the introverted, reflective, more intuitive one. So Paul would come up with most of the sort of melodic ideas, and he'd say, how about this, and Andy would go, no, oh yes, yeah, yes, okay, do that, but do it the note higher, yes. So they had a really good way of working, and you know, it worked. You know, guys, I was listening to one of their early albums, Architecture and Morality. I was listening to it a couple of days ago just to sort of brush up on my memory for this video. I haven't listened to it in a long time, and you know, especially now listening to it as in my more recent years now, and also as a producer, you know, what blew me away was how grown up it was. Even by today's standards, it's like nothing. It just stands on its own. I had to remind myself that, you know, they were about 20 years old at the time when they did this, and I was like, wow, you know, this is so like grown up. And I'm not being condescending towards younger people, of course not, but I'm just saying, you know, these are 20-year-olds, and they were writing about, you know, Enola Gay, the bomber that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Oil refineries, they were writing about Joan of Arc. Such grown up, you know, they were 20 years old, and you know, it's so reactionary and so different, I think, now of the current state of commercial pop music, where it's kind of like, I met this girl in the club, boom, 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 we went home and we went boom, 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 I met this girl in the club, what do you think of that? the record company goes, yeah, could you put a hook into it? Put a hook into it, man. Put a hook into it. It's got to grab people. Put a hook into it. Okay. Whoa, oh, that's good, yeah. Whoa, I met this girl in the club. Whoa, yeah, but you must do it 3 times, because whoa. Remember, 3 times in a row, then you got to hit, because that's what gets people going, you know what I'm saying? Whoa, I met this girl in the club. Whoa. Yeah, the dreadful state of pop music at the moment. It's all about meeting a girl in the club and boom, boom, boom. Anyway, back on topic. Okay, so you had these really young, talented guys who said they weren't even musicians. You know, they learned how to play on the stage. It's amazing when you listen to how musical that stuff is. Songs like Sealand. It just takes you away, and it's so ahead of its time, so ahead of its time. So the first single, Electricity, was released in 1979, and as I say, they were paying homage to Kraftwerk. And what's amazing about that is, I'm going to post a link to a documentary down below, which was called Souvenir, the story of OMD, and you should watch it. Interesting, in retrospect, when we look back at those records, and even as a fan and as a producer, I listen back and I go, wow, it's really well done. But interesting watching that documentary and watching Andy McCluskey, how he got the old tapes from the studio sessions, and he was converting the tapes into digital, and he sits in his studio there, and he runs you through the songs in, songs like Enola Gay and Electricity. He goes through the sounds in isolation, and it's fascinating to hear how primitive the sounds were in isolation. And you sort of think at the time, oh, it's a signed band, it was a great studio. No, it wasn't. They had no money, and even like Paul Humphreys used to build synthesizers using his knowledge of electronics. It's incredible to see what they did with the technology they had. I mean, even Electricity, the song they didn't have a sequencer, so that was all played by hand, guys, and that is incredible. And it's, just listening to that record the other day, it's so sonically pleasing. Look, I just know as a producer the way we make records these days, and to think what they had those days. They didn't have anything, and to produce what they did back then in conjunction with the brilliant lyrical content at the young age they were at is mind-blowing. So I've got so much respect for OMD, like I can't tell you. It's funny, as you get older and more experienced and you look back, and it makes you appreciate things more. Incredible. So they got signed by Tony Wilson from Factory Records, and that's where things started to move really quickly, because although a lot of people said, you won't make it, your name's weird and you guys are weird, Tony Wilson did say, well, you write pop songs and this is modern pop music, and he did give them the break. And then after that, they got picked up by a lady called Carol Wilson from Virgin and got signed to Virgin Records. So it did move very, very quickly, and it was like a whirlwind, and they really got to a point like, wow, we can't do anything wrong. And I think that's the magic about it, is it was that genuine enthusiasm, and it was untarnished by record company, I met the girls in the club, boom, boom, boom. There was none of that kind of, oh, you've got to write the hook, and it was just, the record companies kind of just let them do what they wanted. Just like Depeche Mode, when they were on mute records, they were kind of given artistic freedom, and record companies won't do that these days. It's like, it's got to be 3 minutes, get to the chorus, get to the hook. It's like they are really catering to the lowest common denominator these days. So now that they're signed to Virgin Records, they were given a cash advance, and using that money, they went and they were able to afford to go and rent some studio space, and they formed what they called the Gramophone Suite, where they produced their first 4 albums. So Andy McCluskey really rocked the boat when he wrote one of their biggest hits to date, which was Enola Gay. In fact, legend has it that at the time, their manager at the time said, if that song is ever released, I'll resign. And a classic example of how people in even the record industry can get it wrong, thinking something's not going to go one way, and as legend has it, that became one of their biggest hits to date. And even Paul Humphreys wasn't very keen on the song as well, and I think I think he felt it was too poppy. So you've got this pop melody, and at the same time you're singing about probably the worst nuclear disaster in history. The dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. this points out, as I often see, people don't often listen to lyrics. They're more. It's quite funny. I had a friend once who was humming. Enola Gay was playing, and they were going, "You know again," da, 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 and I went, "What are you saying?" And he went, "You know again." No, it's not "you know again." It's not "you know again." It's Enola Gay. You should have stayed at home. Yes. The point I'm trying to make is people like the melody, and I think a lot of people didn't realize what the song was about, and later when they realized what it was about, they were like, "Oh my god, this is terrible." But anyway, Enola Gay went on to be a smash hit and is one of their biggest hits to date. So they really felt like they were conquering the world. They couldn't do anything wrong. But I think where things started to go wrong for them was when they released their album. Was it the 1984 Junk Culture, where I think they were just going, we can't put a foot wrong. And I think when they released that record, that the public were like, or the fans were like, "No, we're not having this," because it was really like a concept album. It went full on concept, and I think they had sort of opened the doors to people accepting them, to writing pop hits like Enola Gay, Electricity and Messages, and then to come back with stuff like really off the wall, avant-garde, weird music. It really sort of isolated their audience, and they did struggle a bit. OMD did split up. I think it was in 1989. The last gig the four of them did together, and it's worth mentioning that there were four members. There was Martin Cooper on keyboards and Malcolm Holmes on drums. But we all know OMD really as Andy McCluskey and Paul Humphreys as the main members. But they did their last gig at the Rose Bowl, Pasadena, supporting Depeche Mode, and Andy McCluskey was really annoyed because he felt they were breaking America, and Humphreys was annoyed because he just wanted to go home and write songs, so conflict of interest. They split up, and Malcolm and Martin decided, well, we're going to go off with Paul. The three members then came to Andy McCluskey and said, well, there is value in the name and the trademark OMD. We would like to carry on with that name because there's three of us and just one of you. And to which Andy McCluskey said, well, over my dead body. So Andy McCluskey now talks about how he had a nervous breakdown. I mean, he was writing songs with Paul Humphreys since he was 16 years old, and now at the age of 29, as he said, he had the rug pulled out from under him and he didn't know what to do. But he did make a comeback when he released Sugar Tax album in 1991, which was a very, very good album. The Sailing on the Seven Seas singles did chart. I was never personally a big fan of that single. The rest of the album and the Sugar Tax album generally was brilliant. So Paul and Andy did get back together in 2006 as OMD, and they released the History of Modern in 2010 and the 2013 English Electric and the Punishment of Luxury 2017. So the last three albums they've done together, and it's good to see them back again. And their quality of work is brilliant. They seem to have gone back to a more sort of like old school way of doing things. The last few albums are very sort of like paying homage to what they did, and I think OMD were great pop writers, but at the same time they had this off the wall avant-garde, arty-farty, weird approach, but it worked. And I've got so much respect for OMD, for what they did and what they continue to do. So guys, this video is just like as you can see, it's just like a general chat. Like with all these videos, my first video is always like an introduction to the band, and then we can, at the end of the video, we'll talk about what you guys want me to talk about in depth. But I just want to actually just run through some of the OMD songs now, just as quickly as I can, whatever comes to mind. OMD's songs to me are all about melody, and it was Andy McCluskey once who said something along the lines of, "I sweat blood and tears to write melodies that people can remember." So it's all about melody with OMD, and a lot of people sometimes their music is based on groove and rhythm, but melody is where it's all at for me, because you can't hum a kick drum. You often hear people walking around going, yeah, but I mean, melody is king. Right, so let's look at Enola Gay. Stayed at home yesterday. It's very simple. It just goes from an E to a D to a B flat. All heartaches can't describe the feeling and way of life. Back to C. Very simple. A lot of their songs are written in major keys, unlike our friends Depeche Mode, where it's usually in a minor key. And their songs have an uplifting feeling to them, and a very deeply emotional. I'm thinking of the beautiful nostalgic melody of Souvenir. Paul Humphreys sang that song. It's my direction, it's my proposal, it's so hard, it's leading me astray. And this little melody. Beautiful how it's so melodic, and I love that video. It can make you cry, it really can. You know, I remember the scene of Andy riding that sports car and then Paul Humphreys standing on the balcony singing it. And it's got such a, the song has got such there's a sense of longing and yearning for something. It's beautiful. I like to always illustrate these songs on the piano because you don't have the distraction of the synthesized sound, and you can sort of hear in its vanilla form how good the songs are. Something that comes straight to my mind is that little Catholic girl has fallen in love. It's just 3 chords. A face on a page hit from above. It's beautiful. We should have known better than to give her heart. We should have known better than to ever part without me. Without me. Now listen to us good and listen well. Now listen to us on everything they tell. We should have known better than to give her away. We should have known better. I can get carried away with this. Another one I love, which is just a simple melody. It just goes from, the bass is just F, G, F, G, F, G. And as McCluskey says, you know, the best songs are always written, tunes are just one finger. And if your granny can remember them and hum them, then they're a good tune. And do you remember this one? Comes straight to the C, and the chords just run up. If you were born in heaven, girl, I'd understand so well. But ever since I met you, child, you've made my life such hell. With every day that passes, I fall nearer to the ground. It seems that I've been looking for something that won't be found. And it just goes up to the C. I was only dreaming. I was only trying to catch your eye. I'm getting quite emotional. Yeah, these are brilliant songs, guys. And as I say, like I did on my last videos, you strip away the electronic sound, but when you just play them on the piano, and you can just hear all the brilliance behind them. And of course, something like that. And what's interesting about that song is it starts in a key and then it comes down 3 semitones. So it's Joan of Arc had a heart, but she gave it as a gift to such as me who longs to see I'm an angel on a wing. Then it comes down. Brilliant how I noticed in a lot of their songs that the songs change key, but it's not noticeable. It's just really pleasing. So we come from that, Joan of Arc had a heart, but she gave it as a gift to such as me who long to see like an angel. Na, na, na. Then he comes, I seem to give a heart away like an offer on a play. She kept so long, she offered her body to the grave. Then it comes up again. And that's the song where he does the crazy windmill dance and he gets carried away. Andy, don't let anyone say anything bad about you, mate. Seriously. One of the songs which sort of defined the 80s to me was that song they did for Pretty in Pink. Was that, if you leave, don't leave now. Please don't take my heart away. Promise me just one more night. Then we go our separate ways. When I was half time on us town, now it's fading fast. I don't know the words. Every second, every moment, you've got to make it last. It just comes to the D. I touch you once, I touch you twice. Won't let go at any price. 3 chords again. Need you now, like I need you then. We always say we'll meet again someday. Then it goes, then it key changes. Instead of coming down to where it started, if you leave, I won't cry. He goes, if you leave, I won't cry. I won't waste one single day. But if you leave, don't look back. I'll be running the other way. Brilliant how they would change keys in songs without you realizing. It's not like the typical, you know, sort of like the musical theatre where we get to the end of the line, change key, head voice. Right guys, so this was just a general chat about OMD. As you know, my initial videos when I talk about a band or an act or an artist is to do an initial video where we talk about them in general and go through some of their songs and their sound. It's just scratching the surface, and then later on I would like to do a deeper video, you know, with various other subjects. You know, you can take, how deep do you want to take it? We can talk about the songwriting, we can talk about the production, we can talk about the separate albums. There's so much, the sky's the limit. We can take this so far. So if you guys could leave your comments below and let me know what you want me to talk about, that really helps. And guys, on the subject of I'm very happy with the way this channel's going. The interaction I'm having with you guys is brilliant. The way you guys are responding, and I'm still trying hard to respond to all of you. This morning when I looked, we were up to nearly 4,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, and this is indeed your cup of tea, please hit that subscription button, hit the bell notifications, and you'll know whenever I do a video. I release one every Sunday and Wednesday. And guys, some of you have been asking me to elaborate on some more production, and you know, I am a producer and I am looking at doing some more videos on production. So these are early days of the channel, and I want to sort of keep it focused, although, as I say, although I've sort of niched this channel down to pianos, keyboards and synthesizers and anything that has a keyboard on it, and any artist that is related to keyboards and synthesizers, that does sort of branch off into, you know, vocal tuition. It branches off into production. You know, there's so many directions it can go in. But so far so good. I'm glad to see that I am resonating with a lot of you, and we're definitely forming a community here, and I'm very, very happy the way things are going. Keep giving me your comments and feedback. Let me know what you think of OMD. What would you like me to discuss next in OMD? And guys, I will see you on the next video. All the best.